This is the A to Z podcast. Expert insights on leadership, business, real estate, investing, and growth.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about how to be an effective leader in the era of AI. How to be a successful leader in the midst of disruptions. To figure out all of this and get some insights, some tools, and some stories, we have Eddie Turner. He is globally renowned executive coach, keynote speaker, and one of the top 10 motivational speakers in the world. Eddie, thank you very much for coming.
Dr. AZ, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I appreciate you for being here, knowing that how much your plate is full. The good thing is this is the third time that we are making conversation. We're not new into this conversation. I remember I invited you twice when I was in the DC metro area, and I appreciate you always for supporting what I do and coming here and sharing your wisdom.
I remember that. You're right. You're bringing back great memories. In fact, we were broadcasting to, I forgot which region, but across Africa. And I remember being just astonished at the size of your audience and the number of people you were able to reach.
Yes, that was a community TV. We had Amharic shows, but we had that one English show. That's why I brought you there. And it was broadcasted around the world, mainly in Africa. A lot of people watched it, and I'm grateful that we have another opportunity to have this conversation.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Before we jump into to talk about how to be a successful leader in the era of AI, I want to ask you a couple of questions so that our audience could be able to know you a little bit more. I know you have IT, technology, and marketing experience, but you made a shift and you are a learning professional, a coach, consultant, and also speaker. What was that reason that made you to make that transition? Do you remember?
I made the transition in part because I love IT, and I'm still always say an IT geek at heart, but I was always fascinated by leadership. And when I decided to go back and complete my degree, because essentially I had reached as far as I could go on the ladder there when I worked at GE without a degree, I chose a leadership degree as opposed to a technology degree. And that was something that was frowned upon actually by my manager at the time, but it ended up being the best decision I've made in my life. Both the fact of going to Northwestern, but then B, pursuing leadership. In that program, I had just phenomenal professors who changed my life, literally. And one of those professors would bring in a guest speaker who was an executive at the world's largest search firm at the time. And what he said and what later take me under his wings, that was the beginning. In fact, it was the transition of me moving out of the IT world into the world of leadership and talent development.
We have that in common, by the way. Myself, I had master's in computer science. I used to be a software engineer working with a semiconductor global company where I was working with some technology front end, back end, and therefore we have this in common. Let me ask you another personal question, which is about your hobby. Whenever you're not coaching, mentoring, or consulting, which hobby is the to-go for you, and why that?
I'm a new dad. So for me, my hobby is spending time with my kids, literally just doing anything with them is exciting for me. And I'm smiling because I'm thinking about how yesterday I ended appointments early, and I went and picked them up from school early and just decided to do something, just sitting there with them, doing nothing. Usually I'm making sure we're reading or some kind of educational activity, and decided just to sit there and do absolutely nothing, and loved every minute of it. So that's my hobby, spending time with my kids and my wife.
I love it. Sometimes we are high performers, very busy, and people think that we always work. And I like what you said, sitting there doing nothing with the people that you care and love. The next thing I want to know, and most probably our audience will be interested, is you are a reader. Which book impacted you the most that has transformative impact in your life and your career?
There are a lot of books that have impacted me the most and have transformed my life. There's several I could list off, but let me just say one that's been one of the latest books that's really got me shaking my head, and that is Let Them by Mel Robbins. That Let Them book, her Let Them theory, is phenomenal. If I were to start telling you about other books, different authors, there's probably 5 or 6. I could probably pick just one outside of religious circles. It sounds trite, but really the Bible is the foundation. But in terms of leadership books and theories that I use as my secular Bibles, if you will, there are many of those. But probably the latest book that I've read from a business self-help development realm would be that one.
Before we talk about how to emerge as a leader in the age of AI, I want to talk about one elephant in the room, which is, especially after COVID, the cyberspace, social media is very dominant. And one of the things that I'm observing is that the conventional leadership that we've been told may not be relevant in the age of social media. I can give you a good example. When I was studying my doctoral program, 2009 up to 2013, we used to say that, okay, for a leader to be successful, to influence others, and to be followed by others, that leader should have the right mindset, a can-do mindset, and also some competencies and character and personality that is trustworthy, believable, credible, stuff like that. Now, when I see sometimes on social media, people follow people without even wondering about, questioning about, and being curious about these characteristics of effective leaders we've been taught in school. And I'm just wondering, I'm not saying this is a bad thing or a good thing, but I'm just wondering, do we still have conventional leadership, the mainstream leadership that we have known for decades, even for centuries, relevant in the area of social media?
Interesting. I would probably refer to the world of improv and comedy, where they use a concept called yes and. Yes, the traditional models are still applicable, but it depends on the context and where you're trying to lead, and in terms of how those models would apply. And they are not applicable anymore. They've been completely shattered. And we saw that, to your point, during the global pandemic, where a new series of influencers began to rise. Number one, influencers, because they would not have had a traditional level of authority, as Dr. Ronald Heifetz would classify it. They lacked authority in the eyes of others, but they had influence. And if you have influence, you really don't have to point to authority. People will willingly follow you. And so they've successfully used social media to garner followers. People follow them and they make very nice incomes without using the traditional models. We've seen how even when it comes to the world of politics and even commerce, people are realizing that you can be far more successful in many cases than following the traditional marketing or business strategies that people would have employed. Finally, I'd say that when you think about, I kind of referenced my time at GE in your first question. I think about how everybody wanted to be Jack Welch. If you were a GE leader, you were really highly sought after because you'd gone through Crotonville, you'd gone through what was considered the best management training in the world. Well, that training has changed. What are people looking for, especially now, as the Harvard Business Review says, you have 5 generations of people working in the workplace. The leadership that was successful in the 90s and the 2000s has truly evolved. And therefore, while some leaders today might pull from the best of those times, the most successful leaders today will find that they're really having to work under a new leadership dynamic.
I love Jack Welch. I know he's a bone of contention. There are some controversies around him, but he's one of my look up to kind of leadership expert, both practitioner and expert. I read his biography, I think, direct from the gut. And it's fascinating how he rose from the bottom to become the top leader and transformed so many things about, especially how to measure success. And I admire him. One question I would ask you is, what are some of those qualities of Jack Welch that are still relevant in the 21st century?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, because I can't think of the book that I read, but essentially there was this book that kind of looked back on the Jack Welch era. And as I was reading it, The Man Who Destroyed Capitalism, I believe was the title, something along those lines. And as I was reading it, I was literally reliving every aspect of my GE career, because it was kind of like when I went to Northwestern. It was one thing to read a Harvard Business Review article, for example, or case study about a co-organization, but it's another one when your company is the one that's being featured. So I felt like that when I was reading this book all over again. And so a lot of the leadership principles that were extolled, that were copied and said to be best practice, really, in hindsight, people look back and question, was it really that good? Or should there have been a different way? And so we look at how GE ended up as a result, and there's been great coverage on this in the Wall Street Journal as well. We look at how GE has, where GE is today. And so that leadership style is really questioned. And would there have been better models? And what happened to the leaders that copied Jack Welch and went and ran other organizations? Well, they didn't really have a good track record. They did not have that same success. So it seemed to uniquely work at GE, and uniquely there was some less than accurate coverage and less than accurate reporting that was allowed to go on undiscovered until long after, unfortunately, Mr. Welch passed.
Thank you very much for giving us that. You are the right person to talk about this, and I'm glad that you give us the perspective about GE leadership and Jack Welch. Let's talk about AI. I know people discuss about what AI can and cannot substitute, for example, when it comes to technology and platforms. We're not discussing, however, more about what AI can and cannot do when it comes to leadership.
AI is not human. That's the most important component that we must remember, that it is doing a fantastic job replacing human jobs. And we say fantastic in the sense that it's automating many mundane tasks that people may not want to do, did not enjoy doing, or that just simply could be used, your time can be used for better ways. But it's not human. It doesn't bring in that element that we really need. And so one of the things that I talk about with not just coaches, but any of my clients is, how do we dial up our humanity? I interviewed a brilliant woman last week on my show, Kate O'Neill. She talks about the humanity of technology, right? And that's been something that's been near and dear to my heart, that I spent time studying emotional intelligence and looking at the leaders in the field, and most noteworthy for me, Dr. Stephen Stein, the founder of MHS, and I love my conversation with him. And that really, it's about humanity and what that can do that technology cannot do for us, even though it does a magnificent job of mimicking humans in many ways.
I completely agree with you. One of the arguments I have about AI is AI could be a co-creator. AI could be a co-worker with you. And one thing that we need to know is that even in the past, we outlasted all technologies, all innovations. We humans, we have more leverage to stay relevant. The only question we should ask is, how can I become relevant in the area of AI? And we humans have so many advantages that we can leverage. The follow-up question would be, how can somebody become a people-centric leader? Because looking forward, what we should expect is more of robots in workplaces. So we're going to see a lot of artifacts based on artificial intelligence. In the midst of this culture, which is coming soon, maybe within a couple of years, how can a team leader or an organization's leader be people or human centric, so that they could be able to handle both humans and artificial intelligence?
Starts with mastering artificial intelligence. We don't want to run from the technology. We want to run to it. We want to embrace it. And to the point you made, every other technological advancement we've experienced, you and I came from the IT world, the human was still needed. The human was still in front of the technology. And even though it might have replaced particular processes or jobs, etc., you needed more humans to actually still leverage it. This is the first time that is not the case. And this is also the first time, whereas Robert's rules, that theory was in the process. That it took 6 months before you see this doubling in terms of the speed and the progression of the processors and the chips and such. It's happening so fast now that the language models and the modalities that were just being used 3 months ago, a couple of weeks ago, they're changing. They're changing faster than we can keep up with, and they're getting better. And so there's just this mass disintermediation taking place. And so to the extent that we can, this is also, by the way, the first time where it's not, hey, it's up to a certain group of people to learn this technology. It's up to a certain group of people to know what's going on and just kind of report out, let us know, those of us in leadership. No, this is the first time that every single person in an organization must master this technology. There was a gentleman in an article came out a couple of weeks ago. He said, if you're not spending 10% of your day mastering some aspect of AI, you are putting yourself in jeopardy. So we must spend time mastering a different component of AI. And then once we know the technological component, then we're in a better position to do what you said on the second half of your question. And that is understand where the people come in. Now that we know we've mastered this, we can know where we can better utilize the technology and still keep the people and better utilize people and have this hybrid approach where we can now, as we've automated and turn certain tasks over to the AI, we can now use the human skills for what they truly are best at. And we can only do that if we fully understand both. And last thing I'll say on this is going back to what I mentioned earlier about emotional intelligence. That's where really understanding all the components of emotional intelligence really become important here, and understanding them, applying them, and continuing to get better at them as individuals, both as leaders, understanding our own emotional intelligence, how we are coming off to other people, but then also being able to read other people, read their emotions. This is something that while AI is good at responses, it is not good at picking up those emotional cues, not yet at least. And so that's where we can still have a human advantage.
Yeah, definitely. I had a boss, and he used to say that, hey, I'm old school. I don't like technology. He was projecting that technology, especially cell phone-based technologies and platforms, won't stay longer. And he thought he's going to outlast them. But coming to the era of AI, one cannot, like you said, one cannot say, you know what, I'm human, I can take care of people. Hey, AI, I'll delegate it. I see a risk there. If you have any tip, because what I anticipate is that future leaders have to know that they need to have emotional intelligence, of course, to get along with humans. They should have the technological ability to leverage AI. If they cannot do both, they're going to be extincted, they're going to be out of business. Do you have any suggestions, or do you have any recommendations where they should start to excel both in connecting with AI and humans?
Well, it depends on what your business is. Analyzing what you're doing as an organization, and then seeing where you can make the applicable change. So specifically talking to coaches, for example, as coaches, will we deceive ourselves into believing that AI will not disintermediate me, because everybody's always going to want a person. They're going to want me and my wonderful personality and smile. Well, we'd like to believe that, but the reality is very, very different, especially when it comes to the aspect of life coaching. We already see many applications that could do life coaching quite superbly. And, so the accountability, the tracking, the asking the right questions, the right prompts, it's doing a sophisticated job of that. So if you're going to be working in, executive coaching, business coaching, and other aspects, some of those higher tier aspects of coaching, that still requires how we separate ourselves from a machine to where people will want that human. And so when we think about one of the things that the human coach does that a machine can't do just yet, you look at the ability to hold space, for example. When a coach takes a client into what I call that sacred space, you've built that space, that holding environment. You now are doing something in that space that right now, that's your differentiator. That's what the machine cannot do. So are you deepening your skills? Are you deepening your presence, as my coach would say, Dr. Marshall Reynolds, to where you can do that masterfully? That's what's going to separate the machine from the master. Are we able to do that? And then as we're thinking about that component, we're thinking about the ability to merge the two, where AI is producing a lot of data. So I reference these other systems that exist. As you're using these different systems and becoming familiar with all the great ones that are out there for coaching, you have data now that should allow us, if we already weren't, to be evidence-based coaches, turning all this data that AI is cranking out into an evidence-based approach to our coaching. And certainly where clients will allow to automate some of those tasks that may happen in a coaching session, be it the summaries, the assignments, the tracking, using it for those types of tools. So task. So as coaches can do this in their small businesses, and by the way, every coach should be seeing ourselves as small business owners if we aren't, we can do that in everyday ways, in small ways. And of course, that scales up into the larger corporations.
One thing I would suggest, I agree with you. By the way, you kept on saying not yet, which means we don't even figure out how much AI may cause us to be irrelevant as learning professionals. The more it develops its ability to emotionally connect with humans, they can take our jobs as coaches, consultants, and so on. One thing I do personally to keep up with this is whatever I do, any product that I release, whether it's a blog or social media post or book or a program, I run it through AI. I give it the whatever I have, the draft, and ask it what to do, the audience that I have, and it helps me. If we started at smaller scale by working with the AI at a bare minimum level, the way I'm doing it right now, we could be able to catch up. Last time I was in a meeting, it was a networking event, and there was a guy in commercial real estate. This person came up with a model, AI model, and he gave permission to the lady who volunteered to role play with the AI. And he told this lady, hey, you can throw at this AI whatever you want. It will handle you like a human. And she was great testing that AI. She called, the AI picked it up, asked her address. Based on her address, they were chatting like they're humans. Unless you have the ability to differentiate at this moment between human and AI, you couldn't be able to tell whether that was a person on the other side who is human. But this person was AI, which means going forward, especially for us coaches, it can easily take our job. And I'm glad that you emphasize by keep on saying not yet. We may be okay now, but it may not last. And I'm glad you brought that up.
Indeed. Now I'm sensitive to the fact that, as I mentioned, it's changing so fast that just because it may not be the case right now, we have to understand that can change literally overnight. And a great example would be Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. He has invested heavily in marshallgoldsmith.ai. And so if you want to see the best example of next generation coaching where the person is not needed, he jokingly says it's him. It's better than him. The only thing you don't get when you go there is his jokes, but it's his voice, it's his answers, it's his entire body of work captured. So when you ask a question there, you really are getting that. And even his own daughter, he says it took her 2 minutes to realize that she wasn't listening to him. When he first showed her a little clip of it talking, it took his own flesh and blood 2 minutes to realize it wasn't really him. That's how accurate and real the AI is.
So given that major disruption is coming, where do you think, I know you are a learning professional, you do coaching, consulting, and speaking. Is it only coaching that will be taken, or do you think that going forward, speakers, trainers, consultants will be taken over? Or do you see any integration where someone could be able to be even more successful as a consultant, as a trainer, and a speaker?
I'll answer that, but let me start also. I just noticed here, Dr. Ken McKellar here, Master Certified Coach. Thank you for your acknowledgement there, and thank you for being a part of our discussion. The reality is no one should be comfortable. Everyone should have a sense of urgency. This is the first time, as we mentioned earlier, that we've had a technological disruption at this level. Items that we saw as just science fiction in the past are truly unfolding before us. So if I am a professional speaker or a consultant, a facilitator, as you mentioned, trainer, we should not get comfortable. We already see what's taking place. For example, even with there was a report with Stanford, if I'm not mistaken, where the surgeons were giving the results of AI having interpreted the procedure, and there it was like a 99% accuracy rate. It was so stunning to the surgeons that AI, and I may be describing this inappropriately, but the level of accuracy that it had assessed on what should be happening with the client, what the next step should be, that even these surgeons were stunned that it was that accurate. So if surgeons aren't comfortable, or it's doing what they can do, right? What does that mean for us? So again, how do we continue to show where we have value uniquely? We do things, we bring some competency to the organization, to our clients, where they still benefit from us rather than a technology that they all have access to now. There's a free version of many of these tools or a low cost version. So why should they use you and I as opposed to these other options that are available to them? We need to make the case and make it convincing.
I know we have to hard to stop at 30 minutes. We have a couple of minutes. I want to use this opportunity. For example, if you have any recommendations in terms of books or programs, if you have any from you for people to dive in and learn more from you. And also, if you have any last minute recommendations or advices to leaders to emerge as leaders in the area of AI, I would love to hear from you.
Well, number one, I would say definitely tune into your show, right? I host the Keep Leading podcast, where I interview the best thought leaders in the world. And as I mentioned, a couple of my guests already. And that's one of the ways I stay up to date to keep leading. So askEddieTurner.com or visit keepleading.com is how you can connect with me on any of my social channels. But in addition to doing my own reading, I like to talk to the best leaders. And so I share that as a weekly or bi-monthly rather conversation with leaders, but then also having those conversations and being a part of affiliated groups where these conversations are taking place. So to continue to emerge as a leader in the age of AI, we have to, number one, start by having a sense of urgency, not being complacent. Number two, being continuous learners. And then number three, application. There's no amount of reading or talking about it that can move the needle. We must apply what we're learning. And it's through the application that we gain competency. And through that competency, we gain confidence.
With the 1 minute that we have, let's just focus on the application part. I would be very much interested to know what the people that you invite to your show or your colleagues, your friends, what are some of the applications they are implementing that could give them edge over algorithm or any AI intelligence? If you have some application suggestions you heard or you yourself practice.
depends on the application what you're trying to accomplish, right? So there's specific applications if you're doing writing, specific applications if you are doing editing, production, etc. I'll tell you something that seems to be universal that can handle multiple tasks and solve a lot of needs, including some basic one-on-one coaching. And that's the one that was announced yesterday. There's a little blurb that Apple is looking at potentially buying. And it's no surprise because the AI race is on. That's perplexity.ai, right? You've got Claude. I mean, so a lot of people know Chat GPT, but there's a lot of competitors in that space. What do those tools do? Of course, I'd be remiss in not saying something about Microsoft's Copilot. My wife works for Microsoft, so I must talk about that. And so if you're in the Microsoft ecosystem, of course, the Copilot is a phenomenal tool. But if you're stepping outside of that, then some of these other tools, depending on your use case, will become very, very important. So I just say those couple for now.
Thank you very much, AD. You've given us a lot out of your experience and also from your own clients and other people that you interact with. Hopefully, those insights will be translated into results by our audience. I appreciate you for coming. Everyone who watched us live and also those of you who are going to watch it in a replay, I want to appreciate you. Thank you very much. We look forward to see you with another interview. Thank you very much. Check our website and also send us email if you have any question or any suggestions. Thank you very much.